Movie night. Andy and Gabe. Andy and Gabe watch movies. Yeah, we're back. We're back, and we're back with the old theme song that I put so much effort into.
We're back, baby!
We don't normally talk about movies that are this recent, but Late Night with the Devil I feel like was a movie made for us. If you're one of apparently 10 people that have watched the first 15 seconds of anything we've done on this spooky dance, you'll know what I mean, but the stuff this film talks about and gets into is right up our alley. And I'm not completely sure if the film sticks the landing for me. So I'll very quickly describe what this film's about, and then I give the floor to my wonderful proverbial sparring partner, Gabe. This film replicates the style of a 70s late-night talk show like Johnny Carson or Dick Cavett. We see a fading star who is just not the success that he could, should, or wants to be. So he decides that he's going to try and interview the devil live on air on Halloween. We have a fucking James Randi stand-in.
Yeah.
And, well, we have
the $1
a film
million prize and everything, yeah.
So, what did you think about Late Night with the Devil?
Okay, so I thought it was interesting. You had commented, we were discussing earlier a little bit about the sort of the preamble to this, that you had seen this in the theater, and that you'd seen it several times. I obviously saw it streaming, and I think it's really funny that I saw this on Disney's streaming service. That was the most bizarre place for me to find it.
Really? It's not on there in the UK. I had to get it on Amazon Prime. I had to buy it.
Oh, interesting, yeah.
Like a peasant.
Oh, wow. Like a mark. Yeah, so I saw this on Disney Plus, which was a very bizarre thing to me. I'm glad to hear that you had some mixed opinions about it, because I was afraid that you really, really, really liked this, and I kind of I had very it was very up and down. So I'll get into the technical stuff, and then we can talk about the actual story later. But so I guess I'll start off with my issues with the movie, and then we'll get into the good stuff. I'm a very particular kind of moviegoer. When I see something that has a concept that is so brilliant and so good, and that you can do so much with, I often run into this trap where if the movie doesn't execute that concept the way that I think it could, it kind of brings the whole thing down for me. And that certainly happened here. The conceit of this movie is that it is, as you say, like found footage. And it's like the master tape of a 70s late night talk show. That is such a good idea, and I wish they had done that. Unfortunately, what we got instead was phony movie dialogue that was delivered by actors who are very good, but who are playing characters that they got from rehearsing and memorizing a script. And that's fine when it's a movie. It did not come off, the delivery of the dialogue between the actors came off as bogus to me, and that really dragged this down. It felt like a movie that was it felt like you were watching a movie of a late night talk show. It did not seem like found footage. I wish it had seemed like found footage. But it was just a movie. And that really hurt it for me. I did not feel like I was watching the master tape of a TV show. And I didn't like that. I was a little confused as to what the actual protagonist of the film was supposed to be. There were a couple of allusions to a person in the audience who would seem to have been the devil or a demonic spirit, but then you have this little girl who is possessed, and spoilers, she ends up being the final climax of the movie, and I wasn't exactly sure what that thing in the audience had to do with any of that. So that was another problem. And those were like the two things that I had to say about it that sort of dragged the project down for me. There's a lot more that I can say. There were some good things, but I'll kind of kick it off there and see if you concur with any of that.
So I think the cast is all really good. I was very surprised to learn that other than the lead, David, I want to say his name is David Dastmalchian, but I'm not sure how his name is pronounced, so apologies if I've got that wrong. Other than him, the entire cast is Australian. The James Randi stand-in is, was it in the Matrix sequels, apparently? Bane in the Matrix sequels. I really like the cast, but I do get what you mean in that it kind of can seem a little bit like an actor reciting lines.
It was inauthentic to me.
Yeah, I think...
I'm sorry to cut. Not the performances. The performances were good for a movie, but they did not sound like they were spontaneously talking on the... spontaneously talking in a talk show. Yeah.
I think the two that come off the best for me were the lead, the host, and the skeptic magician. And I think that's because Jack Delroy is putting on a performance to the audience. Quite literally, he is the host and he is doing his whole late night thing. And I think he comes off really well. I think he comes off as genuinely charming and funny at the beginning. And for a similar reason, I think that Carmichael the Conjurer, I think he comes off really well because, again, he is a showman. I think there are issues in that the film wants to justify what happens in the commercial breaks by saying that it's behind the scenes footage. All I can say is that didn't feel like behind the scenes footage.
No.
And by the way, I am fine. I'm completely fine with those scenes being in the movie. If they just hadn't explained it, I would have just gone, this is all make-believe. This is what happened when the cameras weren't rolling. I would have gone with it. But the attempt to justify it as behind the scenes, to me, makes more problems for the film, because they're doing that whole, this is their personality when the cameras are off, but I don't think that these characters would be talking the way they do in the black and white scenes.
Right.
Were they knowingly on camera?
Yeah, and they didn't come off like they were just off the top of their head spontaneously. They came, that whole thing, it's hard to explain, not the performances, but the presentation was phony. And to me, and that hurt it. That hurt it. It hurt it hurt the concept and the conceit of the film, that I would have really liked if it had been an actual found footage thing, if they had done a little bit more to make it seem authentic, like this was an actual episode of television that was recorded for an audience.
I get you, and I think I agree to a degree. There was things that I was reading, because I haven't seen tons and tons of old 70s late night talk show footage, like if Rod Serling was on it, I may have seen it. I'll look at stuff like that. Like, I'm aware of Johnny Carson. I'm aware of Dick Cavett. I've seen stuff like, and obviously for the people in the audience who may be British like me, of course I know Michael Parkinson. So I'm aware of those shows. Yeah, some people had complained that it didn't quite feel like what a real show from this era would. They use a lot of pans and zooms and things like that a show like Johnny Carson or Parkinson or something like that wouldn't have done. I don't mind that, because At the end of the day, for a film, you do need close-ups on people's faces, so that bit of inauthenticity I don't mind. But also because, okay, just because Johnny Carson didn't use those techniques, that doesn't mean that Night Owls with Jack Delroy didn't use those techniques.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a problem. You know, you don't know what
I agree.
what the show did. You know, I don't think that's a problem. Maybe in this world, this show just used those sort of camera techniques more. You know, I don't mind that.
Maybe. I think it would have been better if they had gone out of their way to actually, like, set up, to actually film this live. To film this one take live to tape. That's how they should have done this. And you know, the fact that they did it differently, it hurt it a little bit. That wasn't my biggest problem. My biggest problem was the way that the dialogue was delivered. It was phony, scripted. It did not seem like these people were just spontaneously talking to each other like you would in a talk show. That really bugged me, because if it had sounded spontaneous, boy, this was a good idea. This was a good idea that wasn't executed very well.
And that's the thing, right? Because I think I'm more positive about the overall presentation on it than you are. But I feel like this idea was so immensely specific that unless the film was remade, I don't think another filmmaker could actually get away with doing this premise. A bit like, I know it's not as severe as that, but do you know how, like, they say, like, if you didn't like James Cameron's Titanic, you're fucked because there's not going to be another one?
That's right. Well, that's the thing, is that it's hard to be so critical, because on the one hand, I had problems with it because I had an idea in my head of how this could be really well executed, but on the other hand, there's nothing to compare it to because nobody's ever tried anything like this. So that, you know, give him credit for at least doing that. You're going to think I'm nuts. Everybody's going to laugh at me. You know who could have pulled this off? Fucking M. Night Shyamalan could have pulled this off.
Oh, maybe
really
actually.
well, I think.
Yeah.
I think he would be, if somebody ever did try to remake this and do it the way that I have in mind, I think he would be great for that.
So I'm not going to talk about Ghostwatch because I've always intended to talk about that on this channel, but I will just say that Ghostwatch was a BBC program that went out live on TV and was meant to be something, not this exactly, but adjacent, the idea of a live TV broadcast investigating the ghosts, and actual celebrity interviewer Michael Parkinson was there, and they do a similar idea, and they potentially do it better. I'd be interested for you to see that and see what you think.
Oh, I now that does sound interesting to me. That's you said that's on the BBC?
Yeah.
Oh,
You can find it on YouTube as well. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. But I've seen other things similar, but let's we've spent the first 10 minutes kind of ripping on the parts that don't work, and I don't want to give the impression that I hate this film or anything. There's a lot I do like about it, but
Me too.
But I find that my positive feelings towards this film are really complicated, if that makes sense.
Boy, we have the same experience. Well, maybe I can give one phrase and then I'll kick it over to you.
Yep, go for it.
It's a decent horror movie.
Okay. Here's my thing. We talked about The Exorcist last time. And what we said on that, foreshadowing this, was that in the case of The Exorcist, it's maybe the film that does skepticism the best.
Mm-hmm.
The entire time I watch this film, I listen to Carmichael the Conjurer and I go, he's fucking right. He's right.
Yeah.
What he says aren't reaches. When he goes, oh, yeah, you mean that psychic cold read the name of your wife on your show that you organised Yeah, why wouldn't I just assume that you had just faked it? Sometimes it doesn't need to be anything improbable, like him guessing it correctly. You could have just told him. Like, the problem I
Yeah.
have with skeptics in horror movies in particular is, other than The Exorcist, I don't think I've ever seen it handled in a way where the skeptic isn't just there to be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that in order to make a skeptic credible, you have to use the sort of reasonable thoughts that they would have. Nothing Carmichael the Conjurer says in this film is stupid, wrong, or a reach.
Right.
Even when there's we're going to spoil the whole film. Even when at the very end you get like tape confirmation of something, he doesn't throw it out. He goes, "I'd like to take these tapes to have my forensics team analyze them."
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's just correct. In any other setting other than in a horror film where he only exists to be wrong at the end, but then it creates to me a bit like a disconnect in the kayfabe, if you get what I mean, where like, okay, we've got satanic cults and rituals and things like that, which, as we know in real life, don't really exist in the way that we think of them and stuff like that. Really, so it's like, well, what was fucking going on then in the real world? I watched this with my sister the third time. My sister is a normie. She doesn't watch horror films. She just watches Heartstopper on Netflix on repeat. She isn't into this shit. She watched it and she said, I was confused because I couldn't tell what was supposed to be haunting them.
That's exactly the problem that I had, and I couldn't tell what was supposed to be haunting them. And then so you had I'm sorry, what was the first psychic guy's name? The guy who ended up dying?
Something exotic. I can't remember.
Yeah, it was some Swedish name or something. Svengali or something. And like the Coast's dead wife was contacting him. That didn't go anywhere. And then it seemed like something from beyond having related to him was going on with that psychic guy. And then that dropped out of the movie. And then there's the idea that somebody in the audience is the actual devil because they're no-selling everything. And I don't understand if that was that thing now responsible for what's going on. And then you have the little girl who's like literally demon-possessed. Is she doing? And then spoilers for anybody, we're going to ruin the whole movie like you said. She ends up neck snapping everybody at the end. Was she doing what exactly is going on here? And that's another thing that I was really disappointed with, is there was no sense of exactly what your sister said. There was no sense of what was causing any of this.
I think so. Sorry, this is my steel man of this movie.
Okay.
I think the implication was that as part of his deal with the Grove, who are definitely not the Bohemian Grove guys, definitely not the real life Bohemian Grove. It's just fiction. It's just fiction.
Right.
I think that he made a pact potentially with Abraxas or something like that to boost his career. And he made some sort of like evil deal that cost him his wife in the pursuit of fame. And that is what is haunting him. But I don't know the logistics of how it works. And this is the thing, right? This is the thing. I want to get back to that skepticism thing in a second, but
yeah,
a problem that I have with the film is... So, right. Not James Randi. He sees the exorcism. He's already discredited the bombing of the cold reads, which, by the way, were done incredibly true to life. The cold reads that the psychic does in this film are fantastic. That is exactly what they do, and the way they take apart the cold reads and explain why they're nonsense is completely correct. But
Mm-hmm.
He does a fantastic, and it's my favorite part of the film. He says, no, she wasn't possessed. This was hypnosis. And I'm very good at hypnosis. Let me show you. And then you see all this stuff, and he clicks his fingers, and it's not stopping. And I'm thinking, okay, this is the end of the film. It turns out that it's real. And then he stops the hypnosis, and he's gone and he's done all of you. And I do like that, almost like you're at a ride at Disney or Universal, where you, the audience member sitting at home, have also been put under hypnosis. Yeah. And they run the tape back. I love, that's my favourite part of the film. I love that they did that in a found footage film or an analog horror film. I love that they broke down the genre like that and did something arty with it. It's better. It's better that way.
That was my favorite part of the movie, and I'm so glad that you hit on that too, because I wanted more of that in this movie. That whole thing where it was this person does this thing, and then the skeptic says, well, here's how you could have done this. Here's how that could be accomplished. I wanted more of that. That was a great effect that they used in that part. That part worked more than anything else in the movie for me, and I wanted way more of that.
Yeah.
That was really good.
So that scene happens, and then the possessed girl says, okay, well, if you think that's what we did, we've seen your tape, play back ours. And they play it back, and of course, the stuff that you see on the tape actually happened. All that floating chair shit, that actually happened. And even while watching this, by the way, not James Randi says, I want to take this in, because he knows that they could be playing back a Doctor tape. And this is where it gets into maybe my fantasy booking for this a little bit, which I'll get onto in a second. But then it's at this point when the movie really stops working for me. Why does the demon just go off? Who hurt you, demon? Like, why was the demon fine? Not just all night, all these years, and then just at the very end of the episode, fella sounds off, fire and brimstone, let's fucking go. It felt like that happened because they got to a certain point where they went, well, I guess it's a possession film, so shit's got to hit the fan now.
And also, we got to have an ending, and it's got to be the big climax fireworks show at the end. That was exactly my impression as well. I didn't understand why that happened. Some of the best neck snaps in anything I've ever seen. There was a lot of good. There was a lot of good gore in the movie. There was a lot of good body horror, and there were a lot of really good neck snaps. 10 out of 10 neck snaps. But yeah, that seemed to come out of kind of nowhere. And boy, this would be a good segue to talk about the little girl's performance. I guess she's not a little girl. She's like she could be 20 for all I know. Like, she sees, it was clearly like they needed to get somebody with more experience who could play somebody who was possessed.
We can't all be Linda Blair.
Speaking of Linda Blair, I thought to myself, we had said when we did The Exorcist that all demon possession movies are a series of footnotes to The Exorcist.
Yes.
And this is no exception to that.
Mm-hmm.
The possessed little girl is a trope that goes back to that movie, and they all take from it, including this one. She was good. She was fine. I didn't find her that scary, and I didn't the demon was fucking talking too much and saying things that were just straight up like intelligent things, like, oh, so and so, I remember when you blah blah blah. Well, if you go back to The Exorcist, it was saying like horrifying random.
It was saying "fuck you" and your mum. My cock's bigger than yours. You're a little bitch boy.
Stick it in your ass, Car. Yeah, it's
get
like
wrecked, scrub. It was just.
It felt like there was something in that person that was not that person. This felt like a woman or a girl who was trying to sound creepy. No, it wasn't a bad performance. She did fine, but. Man, that was just comparing it to Linda Blair. Like there is no comparison, and there will never be a comparison.
Yeah, and then
it's an unfair comparison.
From there, the whole conceit of it being a master tape breaks down, and we get some sort of hallucination. We see into Jack Delroy's mind, maybe his past, and that's where I feel like, you know what. For the millions watching around the world, if I'm being dumb and I'm not getting something that is completely clear, then I throw my hands up and say, sorry guys, this time I goofed and I missed something obvious. I like to think that I am pretty good for picking out what's going on in films. This time I'm genuinely confused. I have ideas about what might have happened, but I can't identify if this is a David Lynch sort of situation where it's more about the emotional experience than picking things apart, or if there is actually meant to be an answer that is not clear. But
no. I don't think it's either of those. I think they just didn't finish. They had more of a concept in mind than they had the details for, I think is what happened there.
Yeah, and I think it's from there, it's like, I like it until the last 15 minutes. And the last 15 minutes, I just don't think I like this time. And I feel like how you do, where you say like, I want to like this film. I really do.
Yeah,
and there's a lot
I
do like.
Yeah.
But that last 15 minutes, it doesn't work for me this time. And I think that, for me, when I was talking about this with my sister, who, again, she's not into horror films, she's not into picking apart films and analysing like what we do, she just watches Heartstopper on repeat. Yeah. I was saying to her that I feel like it actually being a demon possession was less interesting this time, because I felt like when he breaks the hypnosis and he goes, look, I'm like, oh, this film's still gonna be going on a bit longer, and I was like, where is it going? But where it actually ends up going, it may as well have not gone on any longer. He could have just not been able to, like, that reveal that actually, no, he was just doing a bit, and that, no, he was still in control, and he ends the hypnosis, and he just fooled the audience into thinking something was real, and making us think that he thought it was real. That for all it mattered in the film, that may as well have not happened. It's still the best scene in the film, and his performance is excellent, and I love it. But that may as well not have happened when the next thing that essentially happens is, lol, it was real. And I felt I felt like we always knew, watching this, that all of the skepticism stuff is just lip service to the idea that there are other explanations, when we all know, like in The Exorcist, that it's going to be a fucking demon. But when he's like outraged and he's saying like, I can't, this isn't what he says, but the sentiment of what he says to Jack Delroy is, I can't believe that you would use your actual dead wife for a publicity stunt like this. Faking tapes, tampering with this footage, things like that, like giving I think it would have maybe in some ways been better if that was actually the case, and that, because we're already doing a sort of thing where the villain is essentially Jack Delroy, and how reckless and hungry he is in pursuit of fame that leads him to do horrible things. That's already the angle we're going to. that's what I think the
Right.
film concludes with, is the idea that he did horrible things at the Grove in order to get his fame and success. We're already doing that. So,
Well, I mean, he had already done that, and then I didn't. I think you made an excellent point. Uh, it would have been better if it had stopped there, and it would have been better if you didn't have, because the whole point, it would have been better if it was just there's demonic supernatural shit happening everywhere, but somehow that turned into a demon possession thing, and I think that detracted from all that other stuff. Like, they should have just stuck with the general supernatural stuff.
yeah, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I don't know how you could have ended a film like this in a way that would be satisfying to most audiences, which I think is what it was kind of trying to do in a way, with it being a horror film, without going boogity boogity boo at the end.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that I could have thought up how to do it.
No, I think you
But-
did. I
but-
think you just did. Just
Yeah, I
end
guess-
it when the
And
he does the hypnosis. Just end it there.
I suppose it's because you're building it to that thing of like,
See,
Like,
because then
yeah.
you're giving the audience something to think about, as opposed to this just being a monster movie. And at the end of the thing, it just turned into a monster movie. Whereas, and you're absolutely right that the skepticism stuff may as well not have been there, because in the end, all it is a really silly looking effect at the end with a lot of really good neck snaps happening around it, and then that's it. That's why both of us, that's why that scene, the hypnosis scene, stood out to both of us, because that's the only time they actually gave us something to think about as opposed to just looking at shit. That's the only time in the movie that they left something ambiguous and made you think, interesting. I wonder if this is just a hypnosis thing. And if they had done that, that would have been substantially more interesting than this Walmart brand
Exorcist.
little girl from The Exorcist snapping everybody's neck
Considering
at the end.
this is a film that takes shots at Ed and Lorraine Warren by name, which I'm very glad it does. This is a film that is so confident in the depth of research, and obviously me and you, we're into this field, so I assume that you, the same as I was, being like, not only do I know what they're referring to there, I know the specific episode of the fucking TV show, I know the specific event that this film is riffing on, like stuff like that. Like the book Conversations with the Devil, it's like, oh, Michelle remembers. Okay.
Right.
It was so confident in its research that it could make a jab at how Ed and Lorraine Warren did not want to be involved with Carmichael the Conqueror, which of course they wouldn't, because they were hucksters. You know, for all of that, for it to essentially just be, no, things are what they seem, it be a monster, I do think it cheapens it in that it's so good at portraying the skepticism, and I think that the skeptic is kind of posed as an arsehole the whole time as well, because the thing is he's Carmichael the Conjurer is an arsehole. James Randi, who apparently triggers people to this day. I watched a video from a guy who's not interesting enough for me to name drop, where he just had a weird rant in the middle of his shit about James Randi. And he really did not like James Randi, and saying like he's just like, he thinks we're all dumb and stuff like that. It was like, okay, move along. James Randi wasn't an arsehole.
No, actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about that for a minute, because it was hard. It was hard for me to not. It was hard for me to accept Carmichael the Conjurer as his own character and not compare him, not evaluate how well they were portraying James Randi, because that would be a little unfair. Carmichael the Conjurer is nothing like James Randi. James Randi did not ever say that's absolute nonsense. This is a bunch of bullshit, and this is how you would do this, and this is just a trick. He never ever said things like that. He said, in fact, I'll give you a paraphrase of something when he was talking about I think it was one of Uri Geller's tricks, and he showed how you can bend a spoon with a little preparation. He was doing it just like he was like, bend, and the spoon bent apart. And he said, no, I can do it this way. And he said, now, that's not proof positive that Uri Geller doesn't have psychic powers, but isn't that a more reasonable explanation? That's the kind of thing that he never ever called somebody a phony. He never called them a fraud. He never said that what they were doing was fraudulent. He always said, this is very easily explained by other things. And he would test it. And when he had people on, you would think, if you had seen this movie and thought that this was an accurate portrayal of James Randi, that when he had people on his show and they failed to, read people's auras or something, that he would say, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, absolute nonsense. This part, you know what he said every time somebody failed? He said something to the effect of, well, according to our mathematics, this is the results that you would get from pure chance. So, unfortunately, you didn't get it right this time, but thank you very much for coming on and being brave enough to try this out. Like, he was very nice to them and very cordial to them. James Randi was a skeptic. He wasn't a cynic. And this person...
And Carmichael's a cynic.
He's a cynic, that's right.
He just a better James Randi stand-in, although it was not intended because it is clearly not intended. Father Karras in The Exorcist.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He is a
good faith skeptic.
Yeah.
He's a good faith skeptic. He like when he says, of course, we're going to start fucking talking about The Exorcist. So this is why I wanted to do one after the other. When he's saying, look, you don't understand how common it is for someone to say that they're possessed by the devil. That's the default,
Right.
He's a good faith skeptic who earnestly does believe that there is something wrong with the girl, but he wants to rule out everything he can until it's, you know what? I don't fucking know, and I'm going to call a priest who is better at this shit than me.
Right. Like in this movie, or not in this movie, because in this movie the guy's just totally, he's just complete. He's already decided that this is that the people who are claiming to be psychics and demon possessed are just using trickery and hucksters. And then James Randi did, for all that anybody, myself included in the past, has said about him, he never came in with an a priori assumption that this was just a bunch of bullshit. He always treated it as a plausible thing that could be demonstrated. If it was really real, then you could demonstrate it through these conditions, and he tried to demonstrate it, or he tried to falsify it. He never had any kind of preconception.
But isn't it more likely, is what you would tend to say.
He wasn't trying to prove it. Yeah, that's the thing. He wasn't trying to prove it false. He was trying to test it. And this guy was trying to prove everything false. And I think that's a mistake. I think that is a widely held misconception about not only skeptics in general, but about what skepticism is. And I think that's not good. That's not good. That's a bad.
When we talk about this on our other show, when we discuss things like this, one of the things that I think we sometimes clash on is that I think you're more open to the supernatural than I am, where I think you would say that you've seen things that you do think were like possibly supernatural or something like that, and I'm like, sorry man, I don't think that's what happened. So it's not even like you're coming at this from a perspective of like I don't like this because this is how I think and I'm being portrayed. You I think maybe more open to it than like you're just not happy with that kind of stand-in for Randy. And although I do think that is one of the best characters in the film, I think he's charismatic. I think he is fantastically performed.
In his own right, he was a good character. I didn't make that distinction because, like I said, I went to the effort of not comparing him to the real James Randi. In his own right, he was a really good character. And like I said, my favorite element of the movie is when he's doing when he's doing his work, the hypnosis. Yeah. So,
or even like when he goes and he unplugs the theremin.
Yeah.
And he's it was feeding back through your PA system, little things like that.
Right.
Like I like that a lot. I mean, one of the discussions that I had with my sister after watching it last night, because I watched it twice yesterday, because essentially the reason I watched it with my sister is I wanted to know how this film played to someone who is not interested in this sort of stuff. And she said that parts of it were kind of boring to her, but other parts of it was a bit too scary for her. She's just not into horror films. She doesn't like them. But she raised a point that I hadn't quite considered, which was, so was that psychic at the beginning a fraud or what? Because she thought from the get-go he's a fraud. And then when he's calling Minnie, he seems like he's pretty real. And I was saying, like, I have to assume that he was a fraud, and then he actually got a message from the other side, and that's why he's in so much pain and he ends up dying, because that does to him what you would assume it would just do to a person. So, like, there's things in it, the way it balances some things well, but there's another thing that it bothers me. And I'm just gonna very quickly say, spoilers for Hereditary, spoilers for Longlegs. Just out of courtesy, because the person watching this video, if they're still with us, did not know we were going to talk about it.
You got it.
I'm a little fed up with every fucking horror film involving, like, every fucking horror film involves a cult now in some way. Like, all the time. Like Hereditary, it's like, and there was a cult, and that's why the spooky stuff was going on. I don't mind it with Midsummer, because Midsummer is actually about cults. That film's cool. But Longlegs, and it's like, and there was a cult. Yeah. Like, I'm a bit tired of it, and the stuff with the Grove, that is definitely not the Bohemian Grove guys. I was just sort of like, it's not that it's wrong to put it in the film. It's not even that it doesn't work. But there was just a little bit of me when I rewatched it, and I was like, man, this is all we're doing at the moment, isn't it? That might be my old man yells at clouds thing. I'm not saying that I'm right on that. It was just a vibe.
No, I get it, and I don't know. That ties into talking about cults.
Which is why I brought it up as well, because I knew that this film had some. Was making you think about some of that stuff.
Yeah, so well, because it was so heavily inspired by James Randi, James Randi, his big thing was his expertise in evaluating these supernatural psychic claims and all that. He was a magician, and in his words, he knew how to fool people, and he also knew how people fool themselves. And talking about how people fool themselves, that relates to how people get taken in by scams and how people get into cults. And one of the things I think was really valuable about James Randi's work was that element of people fooling themselves, that is not something that happens to a certain type of person. That's not something that happens to stupid people. That's not something that happens to unintelligent or unsophisticated people. It happens to everybody. We all do that. People, if you look into the Heaven's Gate cult, for example, who thought that they were going to kill them, selves, and then they were going to wake up on a spaceship and get taken up.
Come and join us on the comet.
Whatever. Yeah. You look at something like that and you think, okay, I could potentially, if I'm having an off day and there's so much shit going on, and I get a phone call that sounds plausible. It says, we're calling you about your car warranty. I could potentially get taken in by that if it sounds plausible. But I could never believe something like there's a spaceship and if, dying brings me up to the spaceship. No, you actually could, depending on what's going on, depending on how people have the ability to be manipulated is part of the human condition.
I've got an example of this that happened to me very recently. So my mum was sick. She had pneumonia, and she's fine now. It's all good. But my dad was at work, and he had phoned my mum several times, and she hadn't answered, and he panicked. So he phoned me, and he went, "Can you just check on her?" And I went upstairs, and she was asleep. Looked like she was asleep. Looked like she was breathing. And I went downstairs, and I'm still on the phone. I go, "Yeah, Dad, she's fine. She's fine." He goes, "Are you sure? Did you check?" He's worried. He's of a nervous disposition. And I go, "Yeah." And then just a part of me, from how convinced he was of the possibility that she might be dead, I went and checked again, and I woke her up, and she was like, "Oh, what?" And I was like, "No, sorry, Mum. Go back to sleep. I was just checking on you." Just that interaction. Now, I need to make this clear. I checked. I knew she was alive.
Right.
And it would have been incredibly unlikely that she wasn't anyway. I doubted myself. Even though I knew. I knew.
Right.
So anyone is susceptible to something like that.
That's the whole again, going back to clearing up misunderstandings about skepticism about what it is and what. That's the whole point, is that we all do this. Our brains all operate. The operating system in our brains is based on bias, right? And we use this in common language all the time. If I tell you my opinion is my personal bias. Bias isn't this wrong thing that, bias is your perspective, right?
Yeah, when people go to you, you just think you're right all the time. I was like, yes, that is everyone.
Right, exactly.
The difference is being
right,
open
then you think
to being
something
wrong.
else. That's right. Yeah, and so but our biases can lead us down the wrong path and give us the wrong information and convince us. The most dangerous thing is when people start they know an answer is wrong, and they start trying to justify it. This is how one of this is a cold part of the cold reading techniques, going back to the fake psychic stuff. When they, a lot of these cold reading psychics, they'll say like, it's somebody with a B. No, nobody with a B. Nobody coming to mind. Okay, well, something involving the letter B is important right now. And then the person that they tell that to will go look for something. So they'll try to make it fit, right? We do this all the time. If our deeply held beliefs or assumptions or things that are important to us turn out not to be correct, we will look for a way to make that work. So we'll build a case for it. And those are all really important things to keep in mind. And I think just to sort of cap off the James Randi part of this, that is the thing that I think he did and tried to get out into the public consciousness that I think was really valuable.
And you really shifted gears on James Randi over the time that we've been doing our shows together.
I thought
we used to do a show called The Limey and the Yank back on my channel, which is it's not lost media, but it's just not kind of public at the moment. Not out of anything against it. It's just not. And you did not like Randy then.
Yeah, I thought back in the day, up until fairly recently, that he I was really sick of and annoyed by the former magician turned professional skeptic. I thought that whole thing was a racket. And I felt back in the day, because it's hard for me to, when somebody hears somebody say, okay, somebody in the audience, I'm thinking of a woman and her name starts with the letter B, and then somebody stands up and goes, oh, my grandmother's name was Bertha. Oh, okay. So now I'm thinking, when I see that, I can't, this is going to sound so egotistical, but I don't mean for it to, and it's not like that, but I'll explain that later. I can't model in my mind how somebody could buy that, or how I could buy that. I can't model that in my mind. So when I have a issue where if I can't model something, a particular thought process in my mind, that thought process must not exist in another person's mind, and something else must be going on there. So because I can't model that kind of stuff in my mind, I was of the impression that this stuff about psychics and all that stuff was some fringe thing that people were just pretending to be into for fun, and it didn't really impact anybody, and it wasn't important, and it wasn't even an issue. And so I was of the opinion that James Randi was kind of a bottom feeder, that he sort of relied on Uri Geller's and Sylvia Browne's to have a career himself, in order to just do the professional skeptic gig for the rest of his life, because he wasn't a successful magician anymore. And those were the assumptions that I made based on my inability to comprehend that people really did believe this stuff and really were harmed by it, and that James Randi really was concerned about that and really did try to make a difference in that. So as time went on, and especially, and sorry if this, I'm actually not sorry if this offends anybody, especially after like the first election of like Trump and all that, and hearing the absolute, this deluge of justifications for that made no sense, and people just believing absolute nonsense about that, and also, so there was that, and there was also the all the stuff about like this self-help for men racket that's going on right now about all these sort of right-wing personalities that are selling like vitamin supplements and boner pills and protein shakes to everybody. That's absolute snake oil. When I started, see, now we go to my thought process. When that stuff, I can understand why people been taken in by that. Then I could start to model this in my mind, and I came to think that James Randi was really concerned about stuff like that and really wanted to make a difference in that. And I think I tragically misjudged him when I thought that he was just being a bottom feeder.
I mean, yeah, no, but the thing is that you're able to, and again, it's that thing of like having a skeptical mind. You've moved away from that position, and it sounds like you're actually a little bit sad that you thought that of him for so long. Which,
well, it's unfortunate when it's unfortunate when you misjudge somebody, and that's really unfortunate. So yeah, I am a little bit sad that I did, because I had come around about him when he was still alive, but not for very much longer, unfortunately. And yeah, I wish that I had I wish that I had thought differently about that back in the day.
So I want to get onto David Dastmalchian, who is the star of this film, because we've done relatively little talking about him amongst all the themes and that, but one of the things that I was sold on when I heard this film was coming out, and I waited I was aware of this film from like announcement and making the film festival circuit, and I waited a long time to actually see it. It was it was David Dastmalchian, because he has always really been in supporting roles such as the Angry Video Game Nerd movie, weirdly.
Really?
But what got me is because he's always been in the background in like say like The Dark Knight or the Ant-Man films, but I think he might be my favourite part of The Suicide Squad, a film that me and you famously disagree on, but
yeah,
I loved him in that role, and I thought that him getting a chance to be a leading man was like, yes, finally. And I was really, really, really impressed at how effortlessly he kind of stepped into the role of a talk show host. When he's doing that opening like speech bit at the beginning, I don't know what you call that. You know, I know Craig Ferguson did it on his show. I guess the others that are not Craig Ferguson and henceforth I don't care about them do it as well. But when he was doing that whole thing, there was parts where I found, in spite of what we were talking about before, where I was kind of forgetting that he wasn't actually doing this job, if that makes sense. Yeah. I wanted to kind of sing his praises because for me, if there's one thing that I can say with this film, from like the good and the bad, I feel like this might go down as his role, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
I can say for sure, hardcore fans, that he's possibly going to be one of my front runners for the Gandhi at the end of this year.
Ah, spoilers.
Yeah, he's one of my front runners. But I wanted to know what you made of him. And don't feel like you have to just agree with me because I've been so glowing on it. But I wanted to know what you thought of it. By the way, I might have mentioned earlier, apparently the only American in this cast. I didn't know it was an Australian film. But it is an Australian film. And apart from David, the whole cast are Australian, and I did not notice that at all. So
yeah, I didn't either, and that's crazy.
All of them have the accent down like that.
Yeah, that was really good. That was impressive. As for what I thought of his performance, it was fine. I'll be honest, I wasn't really blown away by it. I like him. I think he's a good lead actor. I wouldn't mind seeing him more in other things. And other than that, I've not very much to say about it. It was fine, and yeah, he carried the film very well.
I like, by the way, how this film I'm not insulting him. I'm not insulting him. I love how this film insists on him being handsome. Because for years he has kind of been known as that actor with the face. And by the way, if you've seen this man's wife, whatever his unique and interesting facial features, it hasn't held him back. If you have seen his wife, goddamn,
that's an interesting comment.
Salute to you, David.
I'll check that out.
But I thought it was interesting that. I don't think this role was. He is handsome, by the way. He is handsome. Like this film has made me understand that he is handsome. But I thought it was interesting in that they keep bringing it up. They keep bringing it up. This movie really wants you to know that David Dastmalchian is a fucking stud, and I kind of like that, and I can't articulate it, and that's like my random thought thing of like this actor who is often known as being kind of funny looking, just getting the ladies just swooning over him. Like there's the point in the beginning where it's like loads of like magazines, and it's like Jack Delroy, the thinking woman sex symbol. And that tickled me. I'm just sitting there. I'm sitting there and just like, go David, you rep the big nose crew. Like, fellow big nose brother, you're the one. But no, I was quite tickled by that. It was like,
That's funny.
it was like, we will tolerate no disrespect of our leading man. He's a fucking stud, and you will love him.
Yeah, for sure. That's funny.
So, what are our closing thoughts on Late Night with the Devil? I'm surprised that I think we've talked about this longer than we did The Exorcist.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, so my closing thoughts would be I was disappointed by it. It had so much potential, and I don't think it lived up to the potential that it could have had if they had gone a little more genuine, a little bit more authentic. I didn't hate watching it. There was a lot of stuff in it that I liked, but
sorry.
yeah,
I'm really sorry to do this to you. There's another really important thing about this film that I meant to bring up, because it is an actual controversy with this film, and I want to know what you think.
Okay.
This film used AI art. It is, as far as I know, the first film to use AI art. The title cards of like the "We'll be right back" and like after these messages and things like that. Apparently 3 of them were generated by AI. The directors just said, "Yeah, we experimented with AI and we used it," and they said nothing more about this. This really bothered people, and I think my position on it is, don't give them an inch because they'll take a mile. Those 3 images should have been made by a human being. I don't care if it was only 3. I don't like that, but I've seen some people, they boycotted watching this film over those 3 AI images, and I don't know if I think that's extreme or not, but I'm curious as to what you would think, and I couldn't tell you which images were AI, because they weren't trying to replicate like a person or anything like that. Like I don't know which were. Because they were also
AI.
edited. Yeah.
Yeah, fuck AI art. I completely agree with you. It's totally benign in this. It is probably fine to use AI and say, make a "after these messages we'll be right back" card. I don't think that anybody's particularly harmed by that. People are harmed by the existence and proliferation and normalization of the use of AI in media. So fuck that. You can hire a person to make after. If you can't do, I could do that in fucking Microsoft Paint right now.
Yeah, I did
so
definitely felt
let's
like
stop this.
Yeah, I definitely felt like while I think that it's a bit extreme to talk about it as though like you don't see the film because it used AI art. I do think that undermines the work of what everyone has done in there. But and then I think if it was only 3 images, don't you tell me that you don't have just, I don't know, like $500 in your pocket that could go to just paying literally anyone competent. You know, apparently they photoshopped over the AI as well to make it more like they tweaked it.
That's a little bit different. If you're using AI as an assistant and as a tool, that's fine. And AI is a tool, but it is so ripe for misuse. We need legislation. We need something like the DMCA regarding AI. We need clear, forward-thinking, because DMCA is very well written. It was for that thing. What was that, passed in 1999, and the provisions in it are still fully relevant today. We need clear, forward-thinking legislation regulating the use of AI.
Isn't there a bit of a disconnect though, as well, of a film that is buried in the 1970s aesthetic, fashion, style, talking points, political talking points, Satanism, skepticism, something so deeply entrenched in the 70s, used AI? It's very strange to me. Like,
yeah, I mean, that goes back to my thing about it being somewhat inauthentic feeling to me. Like maybe that was one of the issues, that they were using it's like when somebody tries to make a picture look old by using like a sepia filter or something, and it doesn't really look how
work.
old pictures look. Yeah, that was kind of an issue with that. So, well, yeah, so my opinion of that, I'll do my opinion of that and then get back to my final thoughts. Fuck AI until it's heavily regulated with forward-thinking legislation. My final thoughts on the film: I was disappointed by it. I didn't hate it. There was a lot about it I liked. Can't wait to see the remake made by M. Night Shyamalan.
I think this is a film that is so close yet so far.
Yeah.
I love the idea. I like a lot of the execution, but I feel like as much as the film can be effective, I feel like it needed more ground up rewrites, I think. And I think maybe I think it's a film that I would have preferred to have made some more bold decisions. And I think that maybe that involves disappointing some people as well, with you not having exactly the sort of ending climax that you would want.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like, look, I'm willing to be the dumb one. Maybe I just didn't get it. I felt like I didn't understand what the supernatural presence was, which is fine, but I felt like the film did that whole scene at the end expecting me to go, ah, and I didn't go, ah, I went, ah.
Yeah.
I think I know what's going on. And yeah, it just didn't quite work for me. But I don't want that to seem like I didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's gonna be a bit like Highlander for me, where it's like I like this and I wish it was better.
Yeah. That's how I felt. I think we both fully agreed on this one. We seem to have identical opinions of it, and we seem to agree on Highlander too, oddly enough.
Yes, so, the best 6 out of 10 ever made.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, okay. Okay, but join us next time where we'll be talking about Boop.
Insert title here. Bye, everybody.
Bye.